It was at a hotel restaurant in 1987 where Karla Homolka met Paul Bernardo for the first time. At the time, she was 17 years old and worked at an animal hospital, while Bernardo was 23. The couple got engaged in 1989. Prior to their marriage in 1991, they had sexually assaulted other women, which led to the deaths of Tammy Homolka, age 15, and Leslie Mahaffey, age 14. In December 1990, Karla Homolka, a veterinary technician, committed the theft of a vial containing sedatives from her workplace. One night, as her family was hosting a dinner party, she drugged her 15-year-old sister, dragged her to the basement, and delivered her as a virgin sacrifice to her boyfriend, Paul Bernardo. From that point on, Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo's sadistic behavior only got worse. They started a years-long torture campaign that claimed the lives of other teenage females in and around Toronto, including Homolka's sister. They were collectively referred to as the Ken and Barbie Killers, until they were eventually apprehended in 1992. After their crimes were uncovered, Karla Homolka reached a contentious arrangement with the prosecution and was sentenced to 12 years in jail for manslaughter, while Paul Bernardo remains incarcerated to this day. However, on July 4, 2005, Homolka was released, and she hasn't been in the public eye since. Following 3 decades after the extensively publicized trial and controversial plea agreement, Karla Homolka's life is now entirely different. She made herself at home in a peaceful community in Quebec, where she helps at an elementary school. Karla Homolka appears to have come a long way from her time as an accomplice of the Ken and Barbie murderous duo. Karla Homolka has always been thought by many analysts to have sociopathic attributes. According to those specialists, Homolka's destructive impulses didn't come to light until her late teens. Homolka was essentially a typical girl during her early years. She was born on May 4, 1970, and raised in Ontario, Canada, as the eldest of 3 daughters in a well-adjusted family of 5. Her school friends recall her as intelligent, beautiful, well-liked, and an animal enthusiast. In fact, after graduating from high school, Homolka started working at a nearby veterinary clinic. Then she met Paul Bernardo for the first time. The two clicked right away and were never separated. A mutual interest in sadomasochism, in which Homolka played the slave and Bernardo the master, was also developed by Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo. Many people held the opinion that Homolka was forced to conduct the horrible acts by Bernardo that resulted in her imprisonment. While it has been alleged that Homolka was simply another one of Bernardo's victims, some believe that Karla Homolka entered the relationship willingly and was as much a vicious criminal mastermind as he was. What cannot be debated is that Karla Homolka voluntarily offered up her own sister to Bernardo. It seemed that Bernardo was offended because Homolka had not been a virgin when they first met. He allegedly told Homolka to bring him a virgin girl to make amends, and Homolka picked her own sister Tammy for the part. On December 23, 1990, Karla Homolka's family held a holiday party. Homolka had stolen sedative vials from the veterinary clinic where she worked earlier that morning. That evening, she added halcyon to her sister's eggnog and carried her to the bedroom, where Bernardo was awaiting her. However, this was not the first time Homolka had taken her sister to Bernardo. In July, she and Bernardo laced the teenager's spaghetti dinner with Valium, but Bernardo had only assaulted the younger sister for a minute before she started to wake up. Because of this, the Ken and Barbie killers were more cautious the second time, and when Tammy was carried into the bedroom that Christmas night, Bernardo held a cloth covered with halothane up to her face and assaulted her while she remained unconscious. While unconscious, Tammy choked to death after vomiting, most likely from the narcotics. In a hurry, Bernardo and Homolka cleaned and dressed her body, put her on the bed, and reported that she suffocated to a vomit in her sleep. As a result, her death was declared to be accidental. 6 months later, Homolka and Bernardo were married in a luxurious marriage ceremony. Bernardo allegedly requested that Homolka pledge to love, honor, and obey him. Additionally, Karla Homolka cooperated in supplying Bernardo with juvenile victims. Homolka presented to her husband a 15-year-old girl, a pet shop employee she had met while working as a veterinarian. Shortly after they were married on June 7, 1991, Homolka asked the girl referred to as Jane Doe to a girls' night out. Homolka drugged the young girl's drink, just as they had done with Tammy, and gave her to Bernardo at the couple's new house. However, this time, Homolka herself assaulted the girl in front of Bernardo. Luckily, the young woman survived the incident, albeit she didn't realize what had happened to her at the time due to the drugs. A week following Jane Doe's rape, Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka selected Leslie Mahaffey, a 14-year-old girl, to be their next victim. One evening after dark, Mahaffey was heading home when Bernardo came to notice her from his car and stopped. While Mahaffey pulled up to ask for a cigarette, he abducted her and drove her to the couple's residence. There, he and Homolka mercilessly assaulted and tortured Mahaffey, while videotaping the entire event while listening to Bob Marley and David Bowie in the background. The audio was permitted, but the videotape was deemed too explicit and upsetting to be shown during the final trial. On it, Mahaffey can be heard screaming in agony as Bernardo instructs her to submit to him. At one point, Homolka is heard suggesting that Mahaffey's blindfold was coming off and that she might be able to see them and then identify them later. Bernardo and Homolka, unwilling to let it happen, committed their first intentional murder. Like she had done in the past, Homolka administered the girl a narcotic, but this time it was fatal dosage. Bernardo bought multiple bags of cement from the neighborhood hardware shop, which the pair used to cover Leslie Mahaffey's severed body parts. Afterward, they threw the blocks containing the bodies into a lake nearby. Subsequently, one of these blocks would wash up on the lakeshore, exposing an orthodontic implant that will identify Mahaffey as the third murder victim of the couple. But before that could occur, a 15-year-old girl named Kristen French would become the murderous couple's next victim in 1992. Similar to what they had done to Leslie Mahaffey, the couple recorded videos of themselves assaulting and tormenting her, forcing her to drink alcohol, and then made her comply to Homolka's and Bernardo's sexual deviances. French was never blindfolded, though, so it seemed that this time the couple planned to murder their victim right away. The body of Kristen French was discovered on April 1992 in a roadside ditch. Her hair were trimmed, and her body was naked. Homolka subsequently admitted that the hair had been chopped to impede the police from identifying her, rather than as a memento. Karla Homolka was never detained for her crimes, despite her involvement in the assault, torture, and death of 3 young girls. Rather, she surrendered herself. In December 1992, Homolka was hospitalized when Paul Bernardo struck her with a metal flashlight, leaving her with significant bruises. Although she was released from the hospital upon insisting that she had been in a car accident, her aunt and uncle became skeptical and suspected that there might have been foul play involved. In the meantime, Canadian police had been searching for the alleged Scarborough rapist and were certain they had identified their suspect in Paul Bernardo. He and Homolka were then both fingerprinted and had their DNA swabbed. As Homolka was being interrogated, she found out that Bernardo had been identified as the rapist. In an attempt to defend herself, Homolka told her uncle that Bernardo had abused her, that he was the rapist from Scarborough, and that she had been complicit in multiple of his crimes. Homolka's family was horrified and suggested she call the police, which is exactly what she did. Homolka immediately began disclosing to the police all of Bernardo's crimes, even the ones he had boasted to her about doing before they met. Amidst the search of their home, the lawyer for Bernardo's strolled in and took out almost 100 audio cassette clips hidden behind a light fixture, in which the couple had recorded their horrific acts. These tapes were concealed by the lawyer. Homolka presented herself in court as an unwitting and mistreated pawn in Bernardo's evil plots. During this period, Homolka divorced Bernardo, and a number of jurors were inclined to believe that Homolka was merely a victim. In 1993, she entered into a plea agreement and was given a 12-year prison sentence, with the possibility of release after 3 years of good behavior. The court's decision was described as a deal with the devil by Canadian press. Karla Homolka is still facing criticism for entering what many have called the worst plea agreement in Canadian history. On September 1, 1995, Paul Bernardo was found guilty on nearly 30 counts of rape and murder. He was given a life sentence. He was refused parole in February of 2018. Homolka was granted parole in 2005 amid outrage from the public, much of which had been ongoing since her brief prison term was made public. Following her release, she got married again and moved to a small Quebec community. This community is currently keeping an eye on Karla Homolka. Out of anxiety and resentment at her freedom, neighbors started a Facebook page named Watching Karla Homolka and proceeded to keep up with her whereabouts. Since then, she has adopted the name Leanne Teal. With her new spouse, she lived for a while in the Antilles and Guadeloupe under the name Leanne Bordelais. However, she had moved back to the Canadian province in 2014, where she spends her time dodging the media. Now that she is a mother of 3 and volunteers for her children's field trips, Karla Homolka appears to be a long way from the unsettling time frame preceding the Ken and Barbie killers. On May 11, 1969, Sheila Davalloo was born in Iran. In the middle of the 1970s, her family immigrated to USA. Sheila studied at SUNY Stony Brook and graduated with a degree in biochemistry. Straight out of college, she was offered a high-paying position in medical research. She had an affair, but neither her boyfriend nor her husband were aware of it. She even killed the girlfriend of the man she was dating and nearly got away with it. The first partner she married, Fareed Musavi, filed for divorce after finding out she was having an affair with Paul Christos, a guy she met while attending graduate school at New York Medical College in Valhalla, New York. Following her graduation, Sheila accepted a position as a research scientist at Purdue Pharma in Stamford, Connecticut. Davalloo fled the turmoil and carnage of the Iranian Revolution with her family in the late 1970s and immigrated to the United States. After arriving safely in their new nation, she and her parents, both medical and health professionals, moved to the Yorktown Heights neighborhood of New York. Like her parents, Davalloo excelled academically, but following family custom, she got married soon after graduating from high school. After college, she went to graduate school at New York Medical College. She started dating Paul Christos, a fellow student there after they met. Fareed Musavi, Sheila's husband, filed for divorce after he learned about Davalloo's affair. Paul and Sheila remained together regardless of the scandal, and they got married in 2000. The following year, they relocated to Pleasantville, New York, a suburban Westchester County community just north of New York City. Both of their occupations were within a convenient commute's distance from there. Paul worked at the Cornell University campus in New York City, and Sheila was employed by Purdue Pharma, a company based in Stamford, Connecticut, as a research scientist. Even though their relationship was going well, with every domestic victory the couple's once fervent bond grew colder. At a happy hour get-together after work in the summer of 2001, Davalloo got to know co-worker Nelson Sessler. According to court filings, they developed a sexual relationship soon after. Sessler, on the other hand, was unaware that the woman he was sleeping with was married. Davalloo devised an intricate scheme to conceal her affair by deceiving both her spouse and her partner. In order to get Christos gone for the night or weekend, Davalloo told him that her brother, who suffers from mental illness, was staying and would get annoyed if he found out she was married. As he wrapped up clothes, toiletries, and photographs and left the house to spend the night at his parents' or a friend's, Christos actually aided his unfaithful wife in erasing any traces of him from their home. He assumed she was divorced or separated. In a previous episode of Snapped, Former Westchester County Police Detective Allison Carpentier said that Paul literally did that good of a job moving things out, or Sheila would do that good of a job at hiding things. It wasn't just Davalloo who had multiple romantic affairs. Sessler, also, was dating Annalisa Raimundo, a different Purdue Pharma employee, at the same time Davalloo was seeing him. Eventually, he would move into Annalisa Raimundo's Stamford apartment and end his relationship with Davalloo. Davalloo told Sessler that their relationship was only a summertime story, appearing to accept it in stride. But deep inside, Davalloo harbored an obsession with Sessler and even made plans to kill Raimundo. Her own husband was one of the people she spoke with regarding the relationship. According to Krista's testimony, Davalloo talked to him every day about a love triangle that her friends Melissa, Annalisa, and Jack were engaged in at work. She would constantly ask me why Jack would do this. Krista said, what was he thinking and what Melissa should do? Davalloo allegedly admitted to Christos that she had spied on Jack and Annalisa with Melissa, and that she had intended to break into her apartment to take a look at the photographs. Davalloo made her move on the morning of November 8, 2002. According to the Stamford Advocate, she went inside Raimundo's apartment and repeatedly stabbed her in the face, neck, and chest, with one puncture wound going all the way to the back of her lung. Additionally, Raimundo's head was struck by blunt force trauma. Davalloo contacted 911 and gave a fictitious description of a male attacker in an attempt to elude the cops. I think a guy is attacking my neighbor. On phone tapes that Snapped was able to obtain, she is heard saying, I don't know her name, but she's a neighbor of mine and she lives in 105. I saw a guy go into her apartment. Davalloo did not identify herself and hung up after mumbling Raimundo's address. According to court documents, the 911 operator followed up with the caller and found out the call originated from a payphone at a restaurant close to the crime site. The manager of the restaurant could not remember seeing anyone using the payphone. Authorities arrived at Raimundo's flat in response to the 911 call. A terrifying, brutal assault scene was before them as they opened the door. The walkway leading from the front door was a bloody mess, Stamford Police Captain Richard Conklin told Snapped in 2012. Stuff thrown about and knocked about. There were no indications of a robbery or forced entry in the apartment. According to Conklin, crime scene investigators swapped out blood meticulously because they thought the perpetrator's DNA might be there. Detectives suspect the murderer used the bathroom sink to clean up after the attack since a drop of blood had been taken from there. Christos subsequently recalled that, approximately at the time of the murder, Davalloo had a deep cut on her hand. She explained that was due to opening a can of dog food. Later that afternoon, Sessler showed up to the flat and had no idea what had happened. When told of Raimundo's death, he reacted coolly, which alarmed the investigators. Sessler was taken up for interrogation, but after Stamford police examined Purdue Pharma security records the next day, he was cleared. He was at work when this assault took place, and they were able to show what time he punched in. Conklin said to Snapped, They have very good security cameras and security system. In response to Davalloo's false information, authorities looked in vain for a male suspect. In addition, they went after the 911 caller, who purported to be a neighbor of Raimundo's. Conklin remarked, We canvass all the neighbors, but no neighbor in that area matches that voice. As law enforcement pursued false leads and dead ends, Davalloo took advantage of the opportunity to rekindle her relationship with Sessler. According to court records, she comforted him during his grieving period, and by January 2003, they were sharing a bed once again. When Sessler was supposed to stay overnight, Davalloo even employed the same visiting brother Facade to send Christos away. Now that she had defeated her competition for the Sessler's affections, Davalloo needed to get rid of her husband. On March 22, 2003, a Saturday afternoon, she recommended to Christos that they play a game in their bedroom to lighten the mood in their faltering marriage. Sheila Davalloo asked her husband to play a kinky game under the premise of reintroducing intimacy into their marriage. Each individual takes turns, attempting to guess what object is being placed on their skin while they are blindfolded, tied, and seated in a kitchen chair. After Sheila had correctly guessed each of her turns, her husband was put in the blindfold. I heard her go down to the kitchen, and when she came up, she said, "There was one last item, one last thing to guess," according to Christos's testimony. I felt her sit on me. Then I felt a thrust like a heavy weight was on my chest, and then another thrust. With a paring knife, Davalloo had stabbed him twice in the chest. Christos pleaded with her to dial 911, but his wife stalled for time, assuming he would die from bleeding. Rather than contacting emergency dispatch, she called Sessler and invited him to join her for dinner that night. She consented to take Christos to Westchester Medical Center after nearly an hour had passed. According to the Stamford Advocate, she stabbed him a third time in the parking lot, nicking his heart. After Christos was able to flee, a number of witnesses who had seen the attack notified the police. Following open-heart surgery, Christos recovered, and Davalloo was taken into custody for a possible murder attempt. When Westchester detectives noticed Davalloo had contacted Sessler in between stabbing her husband, they decided to drive to Stamford to speak with him. After finding out about the recent death of his girlfriend, they got in touch with the detectives investigating the Raimundo homicide and established a connection between the two cases. Upon hearing the 911 tape, I said to them, that's Sheila Davalloo's voice. Carpentier told snapped. After stabbing her former spouse, Christos, in 2004, Davalloo was found guilty of attempted murder and assault. She received a maximum sentence of 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. After methodically and gradually assembling evidence against her, Davalloo was imprisoned in Connecticut by the authorities for Raimundo's murder. The prosecution leant heavily on two incriminating pieces of evidence: the 911 call recording of Davalloo from the afternoon of the murder and the blood sample from the bathroom sink that was positively identified to be of Davalloo. In the end, she was also charged with the murder of Raimundo and given a 50-year prison term. She will start her 50-year sentence in a Connecticut prison after serving her 25-year term at the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women in New York. Firozeh Dehghanpour was a 27-year-old Iranian exchange student at the University of Nebraska in Omaha. She was a gifted math student who was well liked by both her classmates and family members in Iran. Her success in life has actually been largely attributed to her skills in mathematics. Firozeh's friends praised her math skills and characterized her as having a powerful demeanor. She would serve Persian tea to her guests and amuse them with Persian delights. With her striking appearance, Firozeh made it obvious that she was a girl destined for significant achievements in life. She was scheduled to receive her degree from the University in Engineering with a double major. Firozeh shared an apartment at 517 North 88 Plaza with a Jordanian girl. August 13, 1983, was the last time the roommate had spoken with Firozeh. Firozeh had contacted her while she was working in the computer center. Having no ride back from the center, she had no idea on how she was going to get home. Firozeh assured her roommate that she will call back later, so she didn't need to worry. However, Firozeh had not returned calls by 11:45 p.m. Her roommate became a little concerned when it started to rain earlier and decided to go look for her. She was unable to just give her a call because there were no cell phones in the past. She got to the University Computer Center just after midnight, but Firozeh was not there. Another acquaintance named Paranday Kia speculated that Firozeh had likely looked for a train or planned to hitchhike. However, those who were familiar with her knew Firozeh would never hitchhike. Simply put, it wasn't like her. Around 6:30 p.m. on Thursday, another friend had seen Firozeh when he took her to the computer center that evening. She had informed him to pick her up when she was free. But given that he couldn't come back until after midnight, Firozeh assured him she would find a way home. As she did not return by 3 in the morning, her friends became more and more worried. They did, however, eventually fall asleep. When, at last, Firozeh had not appeared by 8 a.m., they realized that something had gone terribly wrong. On the morning of August 14, 1983, another acquaintance, Abu Hassan, who lived nearby, officially filed a missing persons report. A few hours later, fishermen discovered something strange and terrifying while strolling down a gravel road called the River Road. They were horrified to find Firozeh's naked body dumped beneath a Pigeon Creek bridge, north of Council Bluffs, Iowa. She looked as though she had been viciously battered. Her papers and personal items were discovered with her body, raising the possibility that she was killed by a familiar individual. She most likely would have dropped a few items if she had been abducted or seized at random. Evidence pointed to her having died somewhere else and been carried to the bridge. Sheriff Steve Troge, the chief deputy at the time, stated that an autopsy showed she had suffered multiple cuts to her throat that caused blood loss, in addition to the stab wounds in her abdomen. She had suffered an intimate and physical assault. She had been abused both physically and sexually. On the bridge railing where Firozeh's body was discovered, officers found hair and blood. Tests on the blood and hair recovered from the crime site revealed that although some of the blood did not belong to Firozeh, the hair did. It was interesting to note that the blood types on items, type O and type A, varied. Type O returned a match for Firozeh, whereas type A returned no match. But in the 1980s, it was all you could tell. In the month after the killing, investigators first inquired her friends and collected hair samples and fingerprints from more than 100 UNO students, but these attempts yielded no leads. It was determined that Firozeh was last spotted leaving the UNO campus at 9:30 p.m., but no one noticed anything odd. Firozeh's unfortunate death was reported to her family in England by her roommate, who afterwards notified Firozeh's parents in Tehran, Iran. Iran was experiencing political turmoil at the time. The Shah had just been forced into exile, and the Ayatollah Khomeini had taken over as leader of the nation. Protests, issues, and reforms were all present. Firozeh was a member of the communist Iranian political group Fadayan, according to Ms. Kia, the director of International Student Services at UNO, albeit she was not well known for her political activism. Ms. Kia further mentioned that Firozeh was a peaceful, sober person who was well liked by her peers. Nobody wanted to hurt her. She was not the kind of girl to go off on her own with strangers or take illicit drugs. There was a widespread belief that Firozeh's tragedy happened because of politics. At least one official, though, rejected the notion. Subsequently, Herb Hawkins Jr., the FBI agent in charge of Nebraska and Iowa, became interested in her case. To find out if there had been a violation of a federal kidnapping statute, they opened an investigation. A key component of their investigation concerned the whereabouts of the murder and the ambiguity surrounding Firozeh's state when crossing into Iowa from Nebraska. In other words, was she even alive when she crossed the state line? The inquiry into Firozeh's death lasted many months in 1983 and involved coordination with several law enforcement authorities. Still, in spite of their best efforts, the case eventually became cold. Years went by, and Firozeh's case had been shelved away. The actual breakthrough occurred decades later when Stephen Martin, a UNO graduate, got in touch with Sergeant Jim Doty of the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office. Martin's career took him all around the world, but he never stopped thinking about Firozeh. In fact, he recalled a person in November 2020 who, because of a reliable alibi, had been exonerated of all charges in her case. While the suspect was still at large, he contacted Sergeant Doty. It occurred to Sergeant Doty that things might need to be looked at again. He insisted that, given the advancements in forensics recently, Firozeh's case be revisited. A beer can, computer papers, her undergarments, left-hand glove, and other pieces of evidence collected years ago were all subjected to a DNA analysis by Sergeant Doughty. The test results, which were released in March 2021, shed new insight on the case. The glove had bloodstains including both a new person's genetic material and that with a match to Firozeh's DNA profile. There were 4 prints on the computer papers next to her body. 2 of them were recognized. One belonged to Firozeh and the other to a computer consultant at UNO. Unexpectedly, a match was found in the CODIS database of the Combined DNA Index System. Bud Leroy Christiansen, an experienced felon, was the match. Christiansen was on an offenders list. He had a criminal record that included at least 3 convictions for serious crimes, including one in 1972 for assaulting a minor. There were 2 similar offenses involving adults in 2014, both of which occurred more recently. In 1999, he was additionally charged of having a handgun in his possession by a felon. Christiansen entered a guilty plea to first-degree false imprisonment and attempted second-degree assault in the most recent assault case. He received a 10-year prison sentence, classified as a criminal for life. Christiansen remained a threat to public safety following his release in May 2018. Sergeant Doughty broke the news to Stephen Martin, who had relocated to Nevada upon graduation and now resides there at the age of 62. It was amazing that the long-standing enigma would eventually be resolved. Sergeant Doughty spent more than an hour conversing with Firozeh's brother. When he learned about the DNA match, her brother was in London. At last, the family had answers. A brother was so taken aback that he couldn't even talk or comprehend what was happening. After 3 decades, it was finally time for some closure. In Omaha on April 30, 2021, Christiansen was taken into custody and subsequently placed under a $1 million bond. He gave up his right to oppose extradition to Iowa, where his trial was scheduled to take place. 67-year-old Christiansen was being held in the Douglas County Jail until his transfer to Pottawatomie County on the first-degree charge of taking the life of an innocent person. He confessed to his offenses. He would have been 30 years old at the time of Firozeh's ruthless murder. Bud Leroy Christiansen was found guilty of killing Firozeh on April 6, 2023, and given a 50-year prison sentence. 38 years after Firozeh's death, some of her former friends, including Stephen Martin, are requesting a posthumous degree for Firozeh in order to honor her legacy and achievements. She was regarded as one of UNO's finest intellectuals. We are grateful to the friends and cops who never gave up. They'd managed to imprison a monster. If you find this video compelling, show your support by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and ringing that notification bell. By doing so, you'll stay updated about the latest investigations and mysteries. Your support means the world to us as we continue to pursue the truth in the world of unsolved cases.